In 1865, when Private Theodore Gerrish made his way to his native Belfast, he brought with him the history of the 20th Maine Regiment. His accounts of the marches, skirmishes, battles, and camp life serve not only as regimental history, but provide documentation which is both accurate and personal. On the 2nd day of September, 1862, a regiment of uniformed but unarmed men marched from Camp Mason near Portland to the railroad depot, from whence it proceeded by rail to the city of Boston.
From Boston, we embarked on the United States transport Merrimac, a huge steamer of some 3,000 tons. With the Massachusetts 36th, we numbered 2,200 men. A son of Massachusetts climbed up in the rigging and proposed 3 cheers for old Abe. Men cheered until they were hoarse, and our ship shook from truck to keel. The first night was one of unnecessary alarm. Between the decks, crowded as we were, the atmosphere grew thick and foul. All were sleeping when suddenly there was a fearful crash. 1,500 men sprung from their bunks and rushed for the hatch. The panic was terrible. Men pushed, swore, struck, and rushed, but to our horror, the hatch was fastened down. There was no escape. Then we discovered the cause of our alarm. A long tier of bunks had collapsed and made the terrible noise. A general laugh followed, all declaring that they had not been frightened in the least. Thus the days and nights passed peacefully. The weather was beautiful, and the ocean like a sea of glass. The Battle of Antietam, September 17, 1862. Our division halted under the protection of a long ridge of land. 2 of us ascended to the crest of a nearby hill where we obtained a fine view of the conflict. Below us, the rebel lines, some 4 miles in length, was on the western side of Antietam Creek. 2 batteries of Union guns were supported by strong lines of our infantry. The rebels charged with savage yells. Bursting shells, grape shot, and canister went tearing through their lines. Our infantry joined in. Back and forth went the lines. We had never seen war before. General Burnside's men were exhausted. A staff officer from General Burnside dashed up the road to our commander, General McClellan, and pleaded for reinforcements. Our 15,000 troops waited impatiently for a share in the glory. McClellan hesitated. He was too timid for a great commander. McClellan barked, "Tell Burnside to wait. I have no men to send." The fatal mistake was made. Lee was allowed to recross the Potomac. The rebel army has escaped to fight another day. Camp life was so boring that we often had to create our own entertainment. Our fat old cook was friendly enough, but he used to charge too much for his doughnuts. They were greasy, but better than our ration of hardtack and salt pork. One day, my friend and I decided to play a little trick. When the cook was away from the mess tent, we switched the fire bucket full of water for his bucket full of lard. We then lit the skittle ablaze and called, "Fire! Fire!" The cook came running and sure enough threw the fat on the fire. The whole thing got a little out of hand. The tent burned down and we were caught. We had to spend the next 2 days rebuilding the mess hall. After the Battle of Stone Mountain, our regiment marched over to the field where the troops had fought. Every house and barn was filled with the wounded. Fresh mounds on the hillside showed where the dead were buried. Surgeons with sleeves rolled up to their shoulders were busily at work around rough tables that they had hastily constructed. Legs and arms were being amputated by the dozen. The useless limbs were piled in stacks like cordwood. Disease has struck many in our regiment. Strong men grow weak with dysentery, malaria, pneumonia, typhoid, and even die of common colds. I too have been sick. We had reached Warrenton. I ate my supper. I rose to my feet, but to my surprise, everything around me seemed to change position. I fell to the ground. The surgeons decided it was an attack of typhoid fever. I was loaded into an ambulance with another sick man, and we moved forward. The ambulance bumped along the rain-muddied roads. My companion's groans were coarse and hollow. I was burning up with a fearful fever. One day passed, and then another. Sam, the driver, thrust his head into the carriage and passed me a canteen of water. The carriage jolted, and the water poured down my neck. My companion ceased to groan. I supposed he was sleeping. I was better, but still weak and faint. Sam brought me some chicken broth. I know I was very childish, but tears ran thick and fast from my eyes. I glanced over my shoulder and saw some men as they removed my companion from the carriage. He was dead. As for me, I am rapidly improving. Soon I shall be in fighting shape once more. That winter, Colonel Joshua Chamberlain became our commander. There were few officers who displayed greater bravery, faced more dangers, and shed their blood on more battlefields than did Colonel Chamberlain. He showed us his intelligence on Mary's Heights at the Battle of Fredericksburg. We had been pinned down all day by bursting shells, whooping solid shot, and deadly sharpshooters. We had to make fortifications out of the dead men who had come before us. All day bullets thudded into the corpses that protected us. One man in Company B was foolish enough to stand and take a shot at the enemy. He was dead a second after he pulled the trigger. We were so close to the enemy that it was hard to tell where our lines ended and the rebel lines began. Colonel Chamberlain was out inspecting the outposts. When he saw a soldier piling dirt to the wrong side, he whispered, "Throw to the other side, my man, that's where the danger is." A voice came back in a southern accent. "Golly, don't you think I can tell where those Yanks are?" Chamberlain replied, "Sure enough, you just keep right here and keep your eyes peeled." He then scrambled down the hill until he found safety within our lines. On June 28th, rumors came back that Lee's troops, numbering at least 100,000 men, were concentrated near Gettysburg, and that a desperate battle would probably be fought near that place. A forced march into Pennsylvania soil ensued. Night came, but we halted not. The moon shone from a cloudless sky and flooded our way with its glorious light. The people welcomed us. Bands played, soldiers cheered, and white handkerchiefs fluttered from doors and windows as the dusty columns surged on. Once at Gettysburg, we were ordered to defend a rocky hill called Little Round Top. Up the hillside we ran. We reached the crest. "On the right by fire," was the command. There was little protection from the sparse oak trees. Shells were crashing from everywhere. Suddenly we looked below us. There were lines of Texas and Alabama infantry. They were moving to crush the left of our lines. This would have been fatal. Colonel Chamberlain ordered the left of our lines to bend back to receive the blow. We were outnumbered 10-1. Soon our little regiment was mantled in fire and smoke. The cartridges were ripped from the boxes and stuffed in the smoking muzzles of the guns. The steel rammers clashed and clanged in the heated barrels. Charlie, my old tent mate, fell with a fatal wound in his breast. Adams, Ireland, and Lamson lay dead at the feet of their comrades. There was no relief. We were pressed back. Our ammunition was gone. We took cartridges from the dead. Then Colonel Chamberlain ordered us to fix bayonets. Bayonets rattled. Bayonets, charge! Charge! There was a moment of hesitation. Then Lieutenant Melcher cried, "Come on, boys! Come on!" The color sergeant followed. There was a cheer, then a yell of anguish. The regiment charged. The rebels were surprised, confounded. They recoiled, staggered, broke, and ran. We have held the hill and routed the enemy. We have won. We have won the day. After Gettysburg, the army moved south and took siege of the city of Petersburg so as to cut off Lee's retreat. Colonel Chamberlain, now divisional commander, was severely wounded during a futile charge on the fortifications before Petersburg. The regiment prays for his life. Our regiment has erected an ingenious set of bomb-proof shelters covered with dirt so as to protect ourselves from the constant shelling. One day, the cook presented us with an unexpected surprise, a huge meal consisting of potatoes, onions, soft bread, and pickles. Forgetting about Lee's mortars for a moment, we erected a banquet table in the open to enjoy the midday sun. Just as we were sitting down to our feast, we heard the shriek of a mortar falling towards us. Rules of etiquette forgotten, we charged for the bomb-proof. On the way, Wyman caught the leg of the table, sending onions and potatoes spilling into the dust. The dinner was a failure, and even more aggravating, the shell didn't even come close to hitting us. Soon we were marching to cut the supply routes into Petersburg. There was heavy fighting and much gallantry, but this time we were fighting on our own terms. Soon the stranglehold was complete. Lee tried one last attempt to fight his way south, but his half-starved troops were on their last legs. On the 9th of April, 1865, near Appomattox Courthouse, we prepared for a charge upon the enemy position. Our regiment was now reduced to 100 men. A charge would mean further slaughter. Then we saw a white object flutter in an orchard beside the line of battle. A staff officer rode up to us like a madman, crying, "Halt! Halt! Lee has surrendered. What a scene!" Men laughed, shouted, shook hands, and actually wept for joy. Could it be possible? It seemed more like a dream. Colonel Chamberlain was given the honor of receiving the surrender of the Confederate infantry. He did so with tremendous chivalry. Before 9 o'clock, the brigade was in order. Soon we saw the rebel column advancing through the valley at our right. A thrill of excitement ran through our line. Some of the men were dejected, others defiant or apathetic, all depressed. Before us in proud humiliation stood the embodiment of manhood, men whom neither the toils and suffering or the fact of death nor disaster could bend from their resolve. Colonel Chamberlain turned and spoke a word to a man at his side. Instantly, a bugle rang out, and the entire 1st Division of the 5th Corps gave the marching salute. The Confederate general gave a graceful bow and ordered his men to stack their weapons. And thus they came and went until all that remained of the grand old army of Northern Virginia had stacked its arms. Soon we were on our way home. In the street by the arsenal, we stacked our guns. Upon the bayonets, we hung our equipment for the last time. It was a sad moment. Colonel Morrill called for 3 cheers, which we gave, then 3 more for the colors, then 3 more for the land we love the best. Then came the last handshakes and goodbyes. The strife, dangers, and deaths of a soldier were no longer to follow our footsteps. Our ranks were broken for the last time, and we turned our faces homeward. I, Theodore Gerrish, was among these men.